구성을 하다 보니까 정말 많이 갈라져요. 그래서 재벌 가마에 들어가 있을 때가 가장 긴장되는 순간인 것 같습니다. 사실 공간이라는 것이 볼 수도 없고 만질 수도 없는 어떠한 무형의 어떤 것이잖아요. 그거를 이제 빛이나 그림자나 무형의 어떤 요소들을 활용해서 같이 공감할 수 있는 작업을 하고 싶습니다.
세상인 소음과 눅눅했던 고요가 잠을 잃은 나의 밤을 채우면 뭉툭해져 섞인 나의 길을 다듬어
저만 바다 끝에 뭐가 있을까
In our headlines on this Wednesday, April 1st, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung and his Indonesian counterpart Prabowo Subianto raised bilateral ties to those of a special, comprehensive, strategic partnership. US President Donald Trump claims the military could end its Iran mission in 2 to 3 weeks, while lashing out at NATO allies for their lack of support. Meanwhile, South Korea's exports post an all-time monthly high in March, while its stocks rebound sharply on prospects of an end to the Middle East unrest. Today we start here on the local front, where President Lee Jae-myung and his Indonesian counterpart Prabowo Subianto sat down at the Blue House earlier on this Wednesday for talks to tangibly promote partnership. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
The summit began with a grand welcome, a traditional honor guard for the state guests. President Lee Jae-myung hosted his Indonesian counterpart, Prabowo Subianto, on Wednesday at the Blue House, where they agreed to upgrade bilateral ties to a special comprehensive strategic partnership.
이번 대통령님의 국빈 방한을 계기로 양국 관계를 대한민국에서는 유일한 특별 포괄적 전략 동반자 관계로 격상하는 역사적인 결실을 맺게 되었습니다. 참으로
My state visit here comes at a situation where the world is full of uncertainty and danger. So this makes relationship between countries like Indonesia and Korea more important.
The talks yielded key deliverables as the importance of the bilateral cooperation was highlighted amid the global energy crunch due to the conflict in the Middle East.
우리는 인도네시아가 LNG와 석탄 등 주요 에너지원의 안정적 역할을 해주는 데 대해서 무척 든든하게 생각하고 있습니다. 이번 위기가 양국 경제와 국민의 삶에 미칠 영향이 최소화되도록 에너지의 안정적 공급 및 자원 안보 관련 양국 간의 협력을 확대해 나갈 필요성이 매우 큽니다.
You have achieved tremendous strides in your development. Your industry and your science and technology is very advanced. We have a lot of resources. We have a big market. We can complement each other.
A host of MOUs were exchanged, including cooperation on the economy, critical minerals, clean energy, and AI for health. South Korea and Indonesia also plan to bolster their defense industry cooperation based upon their joint development of the KF-21 fighter jet. The leaders also addressed their global contribution as middle powers. Later in the day, the Indonesian leader was hosted for a state lunch, along with key business leaders, building a personal bond and friendship. President Lee presented his Indonesian counterpart with the nation's highest order, the Grand Order of Mugunghwa. The top-level talks come amid what the president calls a complex poly-crisis on a global level. On Friday, President Lee will host his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, at the Blue House. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
On the international front, U.S. President Donald Trump claims the Pentagon's military campaign against Iran will end in about 2 to 3 weeks, adding that a deal is not necessary as long as Tehran has been rendered incapable of developing nuclear weapons. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
Speaking at the White House on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump signaled a withdrawal of American forces from Iran within weeks as the Pentagon simultaneously ramps up pressure on Tehran to secure a ceasefire agreement.
Excuse me? I think we're 2 or 3 weeks.
Not 3 weeks. If it is
we'll leave. And it's very clearly covered.
Trump also added that the U.S. could leave without a deal as long as the U.S. achieves its goal of denuclearizing Iran. And he repeated his claims that Iran is the one that wants a deal.
And they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon. Then we'll leave. Whether we have a deal or not, it's irrelevant.
Shortly after this, the White House also announced that at 9 p.m. Wednesday local time, President Trump will address the public on the latest on Operation Epic Fury. According to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt's ex-post, it's a, quote, an important update on Iran. Despite the timeline for withdrawal, the U.S. Defense Department is maintaining a hardline stance to force an agreement. Following a visit to U.S. Central Command, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated that American firepower is increasing while Iran's capabilities are degrading.
This new regime, because regime change has occurred, should be wiser than the last. President Trump will make a deal he is willing. And the terms of the deal are known to them. If Iran is not willing, then the United States War Department will continue with even more intensity.
Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that he is exchanging direct messages with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. However, Araghchi said that these back-channel communications do not constitute formal negotiations. Simultaneously, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has signaled a conditional willingness to de-escalate. He stated that Tehran is prepared to end the conflict, provided there are concrete guarantees against any further attacks on Iranian soil. Pezeshkian said that Iran had previously engaged in good faith, calling recent military actions by the U.S. and Israel a violation of international law. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, taking to his social media platform, Mr. Trump has condemned NATO allies for their broad opposition to his military operation against Iran, which has reportedly resulted in restrictions of airspace access and logistical support. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
Tensions are rising between the United States and other NATO members as U.S. President Donald Trump pushes allies to support military action against Iran, but key partners are resisting. Several European countries have taken concrete steps to distance themselves from the conflict. Spain has closed its airspace to U.S. military aircraft, while Italy denied permission for American planes bound for the Middle East to land at a base in Sicily. Poland has also rejected U.S. suggestions to relocate its Patriot air defense systems, emphasizing that its current deployments are critical to national security. President Trump responded sharply on social media on Tuesday, criticizing allies for what he described as a lack of support. He singled out France for refusing to allow U.S. military supply flights to pass through its airspace, writing that the U.S. would remember the decision. Trump also warned both France and the United Kingdom that Washington may reconsider its security commitments if allies continue to stay out of the conflict. In a series of posts, he also accused allies of failing to contribute while benefiting from U.S. support. The president went further, urging countries affected by disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz to take matters into their own hands. He called on nations like the UK to secure their own energy routes, suggesting they go to the Strait and take it. The Strait of Hormuz remains a critical global oil choke point, and ongoing fighting has significantly disrupted supply flows. Trump claimed Iran has already been largely weakened, saying the hard part is done, and urged allies to act independently moving forward. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here in South Korea, fresh talk about a potential end to the conflict in the Middle East triggered a strong rebound on the local bourse, while the local currency regained some ground. Our Kim Jin-ong covers Wednesday's markets. The Kospi ended 8.4% higher at 5,478.7 on Wednesday, rebounding after barely holding above the 5,000 level the day before on hopes of a possible end to the U.S.-Iran conflict. A buy-side sidecar was triggered shortly after the opening as the Kospi 200 futures index jumped more than 5%, halting program buying for 5 minutes. The Kosdaq also saw a sharp rise with a buy-side sidecar activated in the afternoon session before it ended 6% higher. March was dominated by volatility on Korean stock markets amid the Middle East conflict. After approaching the 6,300 level before the outbreak, the Kospi swung sharply and at one point on Tuesday dropped nearly 20% from its peak. Foreign selling was a key feature last month. Overseas investors posted net sales of 35.8 trillion won, or approximately $2.4 billion on the Kospi, marking the largest monthly output on record. Holding about 35% of the market, their moves carry a significant impact on its overall direction.
Foreign investors have grown cautious on Asian markets, including Korea, amid the Middle East risks, while profit-taking on major chip stocks added to the selling. However, despite the large sell-off, it accounts for less than 1% of total market capitalization, so it should be viewed in proportion.
The $1 rate also eased, ending 28.81 lower at 1,501.3, after hitting its highest level since the global financial crisis a day earlier. South Korea's inclusion in the World Government Bond Index, or WGBI, also provided a boost, with Wednesday marking the first day of its entry. Compiled by a subsidiary of the London Stock Exchange Group, the WGBI is a key global bond index tracked by institutional investors. Inclusion signals entry into a developed market bond group, boosting credibility and attracting foreign inflows that support the won.
Korean government bonds are gaining recognition as meeting developed market safety standards, which could bring in around $5 billion in inflows over time. With the inclusion taking effect, foreign investors are buying Korean bonds, bringing dollars into the country and adding upward pressure on the won.
Some in the market see the won settling into a new normal around the 1,500 level.
though the outlook remains uncertain amid lingering risks at home and abroad. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the export front, South Korea's shipments overseas posted an all-time monthly high in March, driven by semiconductors that appeared largely unaffected by the turmoil in the Middle East. Our Park Jun-an covers the stellar trade performance.
South Korea's exports reached an all-time high in March, hitting $86.1 billion. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources on Wednesday, exports surged 48.3% on year to set the 10th straight monthly record in exports. With this, exports have surpassed 80 billion for the first time in the country's history. Average daily exports, adjusted for the number of working days, also jumped 41.9% to $3.74 billion, marking the highest level ever recorded for any period. This comes despite March being overshadowed by concerns over the conflict in the Middle East, which impacted the overall economy with rising crude oil prices. The export surge was heavily driven by the semiconductor sector. Chip exports reached a record monthly high of $32.8 billion. This record is 151% higher than the export figure recorded in the same period last year. The growth is backed by skyrocketing memory chip prices, with fixed prices for key DRAM and NAND products jumping between 605 and 863% compared to March 2025. Korea's exports in the first quarter reached $219.3 billion. Compared to the export target set for the end of 2026, the first quarter figure is on track, already accounting for nearly 30% of the target. However, the ministry said there are still some uncertainties that could potentially impact export conditions in the next 3 quarters.
In terms of annual exports, we can expect a figure higher than the initial target of $740 billion. However, given the ongoing economic uncertainty stemming from the war in the Middle East, along with the impact of U.S. tariffs, it is difficult for us to project exports at a significantly higher level at this point, and we are responding to the situation with a high degree of caution.
As South Korea stays on track to meet its annual export targets, the focus now shifts to how effectively supply chain risks can be managed and potential disruptions can be minimized. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
The members of the team behind the Netflix sensation K-pop Demon Hunters met with fans here in South Korea to share their thoughts on their most recent critical acclaim as well as plans for a sequel. Our culture correspondent Park Kwon-woo files this report.
Fresh off their Oscar triumphs, the team returns to Korea with multiple golden statuettes as expectations soar following the official announcement of a sequel. Director Maggie Gang says she's currently working on the storyline, now in early development, while keeping details to a minimum and avoiding spoilers.
My fellow director Chris and I will be making the kind of movie we'd want to see, as we did the first time. So, stay tuned. It will be even more eventful, at an even greater scale. As for the music, I still want to showcase Korean trot alongside heavy metal.
The Koreanness is the soul of the movie on every level. Combination of like really grounding it in the culture, but also breaking rules everywhere. I think we'll try to do that. And in my experience of Korean culture and Korean people is that they've been through a lot. And there's a pride and a strength and a sense of unity that I think is really moving. And
Director Maggie Gang also recalled the moment she captured the first ever Best Animated Feature Oscar for a filmmaker of Korean heritage.
I have felt this as a Korean myself, not feeling completely Korean. And now that we have reached this kind of a global market, especially in entertainment, I do think a lot of us, like myself and EJ, who kind of are skirting both cultures, we are the ones who will be bridging that gap between cultures, whether it's Korean or not.
The film's success was shared by its music team as well, including singer-songwriter EJ, who performed at the '98 Academy Awards after collecting an Oscar.
I never imagined it would become so globally viral, especially since I was made fun of for loving K-pop when I was younger. At the Oscars, seeing all the filmmakers singing along while holding light sticks as we performed with traditional Korean music, including pansori, made me so proud that I burst into tears.
With the music team also showing positivity over featuring more Korean-style music, including Try, expectations are higher than ever. And with that in mind, K-Pop Demon Hunters 2 is set to be released around 2029 to once again spotlight K-culture on the global stage. 박건우, Arirang News.
And the 2026 KBO League is in season as we speak, and further fueling the excitement on the field and at the stadium is Team Korea's earlier remarkable performance at this year's World Baseball Classic. I have our Chung Hae-rim filing this report from the ground.
This is the Jamsil Sports Complex in Seoul, packed with fans. On Tuesday evening, the Shinhan Seoul KBO League saw the LG Twins take on the Kia Tigers, with baseball fever returning to the capital. Much of this excitement stems from Korea's recent success in the World Baseball Classic, where the team advanced to the quarterfinals for the first time in 17 years.
The energy from the fans at the stadium was amazing. It made the game so much more exciting to play. I'm incredibly thankful for the overwhelming support we've received, both on and off the field. Our goal is, of course, back-to-back championships. We're a team that knows how to find its momentum, so I'm staying focused.
Outside the diamond, a festival atmosphere was in full swing before the game. Fans grabbed their favorite stadium snacks and showed off their love for their team in colorful uniforms.
I miss cheering at the baseball stadium because it's my favorite part of watching the games.
I'm very excited for all the cheering, and I really want to see if there's going to be some good games, like some good hits as well.
As the game began, the stadium turned into a sea of emotion as fans cheered and chanted along to the beat of player songs and also shared both the joy of a hit and the disappointment of an out. Raw passion and love of baseball were in the air, with fans saying they had missed this experience.
The hardest part was definitely the long wait after last season ended. But now that it's finally back, being here in this beautiful weather with my friends feels great.
I hope people realize the owner of Jamsil Stadium is the LG Twins.
The sheer volume of fans returning to the stands signals a golden age for the league. That fever isn't just limited to Jamsil. Over 211,000 fans packed stadiums nationwide during the opening weekend, marking the third highest attendance for an opening series in KBO history.
Can you hear the roar? After another sellout opening weekend, Korea's most loved sport is officially back. Now, all eyes on whether this momentum can carry the KBO to a historic 13 million fans. Chung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has threatened to destroy American tech and defense company facilities across the Middle East. The IRGC, in a statement released on Tuesday by the government-backed Tasnim news agency, named 18 U.S. companies for what it calls active participation in terrorist plots. The list of companies include Microsoft, Google, Apple, Meta, NVIDIA, Palantir, and Boeing. The IRGC ordered people within 1 kilometer of those facilities to evacuate immediately and said strikes could begin as early as Wednesday evening. This follows a confirmed Iranian drone strike on March 3rd that knocked out Amazon Web Services cloud facilities in the UAE and Bahrain. A White House official told reporters the U.S. military stands fully prepared to stop any Iranian attack, citing a 90% drop in missile and drone strikes since the war began. Pakistan and China have issued a 5-point joint initiative demanding an immediate ceasefire in the Gulf and the restoration of safe shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The two foreign ministers met in Beijing on Tuesday as Iran-backed strikes continue to rattle the region and global energy markets, pushing average U.S. gas prices past $4 a gallon for the first time in nearly 4 years. Meeting in Beijing, the two foreign ministers put forward a 5-point initiative calling on every party to commit to diplomacy as the only path forward, protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, and respect the sovereignty of Iran and Gulf nations, including Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. Pakistan, which shares a 900-kilometer border with Iran, is emerging as a key mediator in the conflict, leveraging ties with both Washington and Tehran. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi welcomed Pakistan's role, saying Beijing stands ready to help end the fighting and create an opening for peace talks. In the U.S., a federal judge on Tuesday blocked President Trump's $400 million White House ballroom project, ruling that no U.S. law gives a sitting president the authority to demolish and replace a historical building without an explicit act of Congress. U.S. District Judge Richard Leon granted an injunction halting the 90,000-square-foot project while the lawsuit by the National Trust for Historic Preservation proceeds. Trump took to social media to call the preservation group, quote, left-wing lunatics. He insisted the ballroom is under budget, ahead of schedule, and costs taxpayers nothing. The Justice Department filed an appeal within hours of the ruling. NASA is counting down to a Wednesday evening launch, which will send humans around the moon for the first time in 53 years. 3 American and 1 Canadian astronaut will depart the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on a 10-day mission aboard the Orion capsule on a mission that takes them deeper into space than any crew in history. Forecasters put conditions at 80% favorable, with the rocket ready on the launch pad. 주지현, Arirang News.
Today, on this first day of April, spring rain is continuing across parts of the country. Showers will persist into the night in Gangwon-do and Chungcheongbuk-do province and Gyeongsang-do provinces. Meanwhile, from this afternoon into the evening, rain is expected in inland Chungcheongnam-do province and parts of Jeollabuk-do province as well. Air quality will reach bad levels across the capital area and central regions, and also in Daegu. So please take extra care when heading outside. Mild weather will continue tomorrow. Seoul will start the day at 7 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 5 degrees, Busan at 10 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 18 degrees, Chuncheon at 19 degrees, Jeju at 18 degrees. Looking ahead, there will be clear skies tomorrow, but rain is expected to spread nationwide again from Friday into Saturday morning. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
To set the facts straight. Get Korea right.
안녕하세요. 방크에서 활동하는 박지은 연구원입니다. 한글은 600년의 역사를 가진 우리나라 고유의 문자인데요. 한글에 대해 잘 모르는 분도 많고 또 잘못된 정보를 접한 분도 꽤 있더라고요. 사이버 외교사절 딴 방크의 일원으로서 제가 한글에 대한 올바른 정보를 전달해 드릴게요. 한글은 조선 4대 왕인 세종대왕이 1443년에 창제한 글자예요. 한글은 자음과 모음으로 구성되어 있는데요. 자음은 입술, 이, 목구멍과 같이 발음 기관의 모양이나 그 움직임을 본떠 만들었고요. 모음은 하늘, 땅, 사람을 본떠 만들었답니다. 한글의 창제 원리와 사용법을 써놓은 훈민정음 해례보는 1962년 대한민국 국보로 지정되었고 1997년 유네스코 세계기록유산으로 등재되었습니다. 창적이고 과학적이며 아름다운 문자인 한글, 한국인의 위대한 문화유산입니다. 한국 바로 알리기. 여러분도 함께 해주세요.
세상인 소음과 눅눅한 고요가 잠을 이룬 나의 밤을 채우면 뭉툭해진 손길 나의 길을 다듬어 아리랑 아리랑 아라리요 아리랑 고개로 넘어간다 힘껏 달려 멈추지 마 세상 끝까지 가자 아리랑 아리랑 아라리요
President Lee Jae-myung hosts his Indonesian counterpart Prabowo Subianto at the Blue House on this Wednesday for a summit that seeks to bolster trade and security.
Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, April 1st here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. South Korea and Indonesia have agreed to elevate their ties to those of a special, comprehensive strategic partnership. For more on this, I have Stephen Borwick with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Stephen, welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I also have Lee Jae-hyun at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Lee, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely. We shall start here in the studio. Stephen, let's begin with details of the summit between President Lee Jae-myung and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto here in Seoul earlier this morning.
I think the most newsworthy thing, the one that the media outlets are focusing in on, is just because so much of everything happening nowadays is about energy. The two sides came away with some shared understanding on expanding cooperation on that front, specifically through Indonesia potentially supplying coal and liquid natural gas to Korea. As we all know, South Korea is reliant on imports for almost all of its energy needs, and it's quite reliant specifically on imports of petroleum products through the Middle East, which are disrupted nowadays due to the ongoing conflict between the US and Israel and Iran. So that was something that, as a journalist, I was definitely watching. Beyond that, I think Indonesia is one of these kind of older partners that South Korea has, where South Korea is kind of further along the development path than Indonesia and can lend some of its technical and its manufacturing expertise. So Lee and Prabowo talked about, they signed a whole bunch of memorandums of understanding, and some of those were on expanding cooperation in renewable energy and data centers. And I just do think that there's quite a bit of areas where the two sides have kind of comparative advantage, as Indonesia still has a lot of inexpensive labor, and South Korea has a lot more technical and manufacturing expertise. So I think the two leaders are looking to kind of further deepen cooperation in those areas.
Right, and before we delve deeper into those hopes, Dr. Lee, could you tell us a bit or give us some background information about bilateral ties between these two countries of the past 5 decades?
Okay, let me just touch upon the 3 different areas, like diplomatic relations and economic relations, as well as defense industry cooperation. First of all, the two countries' diplomatic relation was kind of had a very slow start, because Indonesia was, right after the independence, Indonesia was in non-aligned movement and was very close to North Korea. So the diplomatic tie came quite late in 1973. But since then, in the past 50 years, the diplomatic relation between the two countries steadily developed. And in 2017, the bilateral relations reached to a special strategic comprehensive partnership, which is one of the highest diplomatic relations we have with Southeast Asian countries. And also economically, the Korea and Indonesia have mutually complementary economic structure. For example, South Korea is very strong in the advanced manufacturing, but the Indonesia is also very strong in energy and mineral resource. So we can a lot to trade between the two countries. And so the trade volume grows steadily, and today it reaches at more than 21 billion US dollars. And also, what is very interesting is also defense industry cooperation. And if you look at the past record, Indonesia was one of the early buyer of South Korea's defense industry product. In 2001, Indonesia bought some military aircraft, and in 2011, also Indonesia bought submarines from South Korea. This was really kind of a springboard for South Korea's defense industry to knock on the international market.
Right. Stephen, with regard to their latest summit, what aspects of the two leaders' agenda appear to be making headlines as we speak?
Well, I know going into this meeting, there was a fair bit of anticipation about the possible signing of a deal regarding KF-21 fighter jets.
I haven't seen anything from the results so far. I don't know if things are completely sealed yet, but the two sides have not announced that I'm aware of publicly any deal regarding defense cooperation. But I know that this is a deal that's been in the works for some time. I think some of the analysis I've seen suggests that a formal signing might take place at some point later this year. But this particular deal, I'm sure Dr. Lee knows more about this than me, but it carries some international significance in that it would amount to the first time that South Korea has exported a fighter aircraft that was developed completely using domestic technology. So it would be a kind of milestone in that area. And it would open the door potentially for South Korea to make more of these types of exports and to expand its defense industry to another area where it has customarily not had a lot of traction. South Korea's defense exports, I think, are growing quite significantly, but they've been mostly taking advantage of South Korea's ability to produce things quickly and reliably and less expensively than other other competitor exporters. But this deal, if it comes to fruition, would mark a kind of interesting point in that it would be a testament to domestically produced technology. So it'd be quite significant in that area. So we might see some signaling from the two leaders on this, but that's definitely something that the two sides will be working on going forward.
Right. Dr. Lee, there are quite a number of pundits who believe that this particular summit comes at a rather crucial time for these two countries. Do you share this outlook?
Yeah, of course, I share that outlook. This summit is quite important and crucial in mainly two reasons. First, for the bilateral relations, as just mentioned, one of the most important cooperation between Indonesia and Korea is defense industry cooperation. And as you know, we had a little bit of trouble regarding the joint development of KF-21 in the past few years. But the two leaders met last year and they agreed to resume cooperation on the defense industry. So it is about to restart. And also this summit is kind of the first bilateral meeting between President SUBIANTO and President Lee Jae-myung. Of course, they met twice before, but it was at the side of a multilateral summit. So this is the kind of genuine first bilateral meeting. And the other aspect is the kind of strategic and economic environments that surrounds both Indonesia and South Korea. If you look at the strategic and economic environment that's surrounding these two countries today, there are superpower competitions and superpowers unilateralism and the wars going on, and the supply chain crisis, food crisis, and energy crisis, a whole range of issues there. So in this context, Indonesia and South Korea as a middle power in the region, we have a lot to cooperate, especially these two middle powers has to put their hands together for the peace and stability as well as economic prosperity for the whole region. So this summit is quite crucial for these two reasons.
Right, and speaking about the economy, Stephen, I understand South Korea and Indonesia are rolling out a cross-border payment system this particular month. Could you tell us a bit more about this, and what do you believe are the broader implications of this system?
My understanding of this is it's a QR code-based thing that allows people to travel to the other country and to make payments in the country that they don't live in, to the country that they're arriving in. Without having to carry that country's cash and without having to go through the trouble of, either paying from a foreign bank account or from, going to one of those money changer stalls. That all feels kind of outdated or anachronistic at this point. And so, I think the main motivation here is just convenience, and because it allows people to travel without, having to run this errand before they leave or having to deal with the. We've all landed at an airport in a foreign country and realized that, maybe this taxi driver is not going to want to take my credit card and I don't have the cash in this country. What do I do? You don't necessarily want to go to one of these touts that's hanging out outside of an airport and offering to change your money for you. So I think it's just a kind of small step to improve convenience for travelers and just to kind of encourage cross-border interchange by making things easier for people. The idea that people might be traveling back and forth between the two countries to implement these deals. We would have more business travel and more diplomatic exchanges, and this is just I'd say it has practical value in just that it makes travel easier, and it also has a kind of symbolic value. It shows that the two countries there's a level of trust between them. There's a kind of apparatus in place that supports interchange.
Right, indeed. Dr. Lee, the presence of foreign workers in South Korea has been growing in recent years, and there have been calls for a widening of South Korea's doors, given the country's plunging population, of course. How should South Korea seek to set up a productive, if you will, workforce going forward, Dr. Lee?
Yeah, as you mentioned, basically South Korea is a manufacturing-based economy, and to run this manufacturing economy, you need a lot of workforce. But at the same time, South Korea is experiencing one of the lowest birth rate in the world. So there is a kind of a dilemma between the needs and the supply. This mismatch puts is grave concern for South Korea's economy. So there has been a lot of discussion in the government in the past few years regarding the easing entry requirement for the foreign workers, such as a visa for skilled labor and seasonal workers and even students. And I guess the government, step by step, easing the sort of barrier for the foreign workers to come into South Korea. And the biggest question we have here in South Korea is that if South Korea general public's perception on foreign workers, would it change in any time soon? At the moment, some part of South Korean society have got sort of condescending view on the foreign workers and workers from Southeast Asia, as well as including Indonesia. And so that definitely has to change. And very fortunately, President Lee Jae-myung made a promise that he will do whatever he can to enhance the protection of the migrant workers from Southeast Asia, including the Indonesian workers. So let's keep our finger crossed. And if I add one more, I wish the South Korean government sort of give a permanent residency to the foreign workers, if it's possible, to bring their family, and so that workers can settle in South Korea, and they can make economic contribution for South Korea.
Right, which of course is also an opinion that quite a number of pundits have also shared, Dr. Lee. Stephen, while South Korea attempts to address a shrinking workforce, Indonesia appears to be faced with a sinking capital city, Jakarta. Could you tell us a bit more about this reality, the concerns surrounding it, of course, and the countermeasures against it?
Well, let me be clear that you mean a literally sinking capital and not a...
Not a metaphor.
Yeah, Jakarta is not sinking in any metaphorical way. I think it recently, over the past year, I think became the most populous city in the world. And I've not spent a ton of time there, but I've been there a few times, and I find it to be a place of great energy and great vitality, and just a kind of stirring and inspiring place, even though it has a lot of problems with traffic and with a number of other logistical things. So specifically what this means is there are so many people living on this particular, I think Java, the island that Jakarta is on, is the most populous island in the world. And over the decades, as the city's population has increased and the demands on the infrastructure has increased, so much groundwater has been withdrawn from the land under the city that has just created vacuums in places, just created a bunch of empty space, and that's causing the land to gradually dip. And so this is in a part of the world that's prone to tropical storms, and Jakarta has a ton of problems with flooding, partly because a significant portion of the city, I believe it's 40%, is under sea level. So this being the tropics, this being Southeast Asia, every year there's this rainy season where you get these kind of out of nowhere downpours that can lead to big parts of the city being submerged with water for indefinite periods of time, and then the government having to find ways to go in and pump all this water out. This is happening in a city where I think much less now than in the past, but a fair portion of the population still lives in kind of informal housing, sort of in places that they've built out of kind of makeshift materials and are not like not sturdy concrete buildings with indoor plumbing and all the rest. So there's a real sense of urgency that Jakarta needs to buttress the parts of it that are on the water and create like bigger seawalls. And engineers, I'm sure, are working on other alternative measures. I know that the previous president, Joko Widodo, was a big proponent of this idea of moving the capital to another part of the country. I'm not sure how well that's going. I know that there's been some issues with attracting the requisite amount of investment and convincing people to live there and convincing companies to set up shop there. But definitely a big challenge. If I could just share one anecdote of my last time in Jakarta. I had to go do an interview at a hotel that was separate from the hotel where the event. I was there for the ASEAN Forum, and I said to my Indonesian colleague, nobody in Indonesia walks anywhere because they consider the streets to be kind of too chaotic. And I said, how long do you think it'll take me to get there? And she said, well, by car about an hour, but if you walked, it might take about a half an hour. So the traffic is so bad that it would literally, her estimation was that it would take double the time for me to travel there in a car than if I just walked. But as a native Indonesian herself, she didn't consider walking to be a viable option for a foreigner like me. She said that I would find the streets kind of too difficult to navigate. But that being said, Jakarta is a fun place to visit that I would recommend to anybody who's interested.
I wondered, did you take the car? Did you walk?
In that case, I ended up taking a car because there ended up being a group of us. We all had to go together. So.
Good to know, good to know. Dr. Lee, beyond trade and defense, with regard to diplomacy, how might South Korea's partnership with Indonesia promote peace on the Korean peninsula? I mean, what's the status, that is, of Indonesia's ties with North Korea?
Let me answer your question in two parts. First, the Indonesia and North Korea ties. This is very interesting. I would say the bilateral relation between North Korea and Indonesia is not much about practical cooperation. There's not much economic cooperation or military cooperation or strategic cooperation between North Korea and Indonesia. But the tie is quite symbolic and historical, if you know what I mean. And the first Indonesian president, Sukarno, had a good relation with the former North Korean leader Kim Il-sung, and the Sukarno's daughter, who were one of the former president of Indonesia, succeeded the kind of a partnership with North Korea. And recently, the Indonesian foreign minister visited, was invited to the 80th anniversary of the Workers' Party of North Korea ceremony. So the tie continues, but it's quite symbolic, and there's not much about practical cooperation. I'm not a North Korea expert, but at the moment, North Korea cut the communication with South Korea and has no sort of intention to resume the talk with South Korea anytime soon. So in this sort of tense situation, I don't think Indonesia has much kind of a role to do in the Korean Peninsula issue. But otherwise, for example, if North Korea is open to dialogue with South Korea, even North Korea has got the intention to open up, then Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, can bridge between the two parties, North Korea and South Korea. And also, as you can see, the former previous example, like Singapore and Hanoi, Southeast Asian countries, including Jakarta, can provide some kind of a neutral venue for talk between North Korea and South Korea. And eventually, if North Korea opens up, then Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, can invest in very labor-intensive industry. And the Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia can be an advisor for the transition from the controlled centralized economy to market economy. And there's lots of role Indonesia can do once North Korea changes its mind.
Right, indeed. Once North Korea decides to engage with the broader international community then. All right, Dr. thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Right, and Stephen here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside.